Yes, I will go first. And, just of course, in the context of this discussion, the whole topic is that should, uh, you know, degrees matter as much as skills. Ideally, there should have been, because both of us, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier at the speaker's lounge, both of us have some very fancy degrees in our resume, right? We both studied, PhDs and all of that. So ideally, there should have been one person who actually rose to the ranks. So let me kick this off, right? So with that context, we have a few topics that we can potentially look at in this whole discussion of should the traditional emphasis on degrees matter as much in today's world. What is the industry looking at? And you are leading a large corporation. You've been running it across different countries, and I've of course seen in my corporate life as well as academic world, right, as to how that framework is changing. So I guess let's start with this, as to how much importance would you now give to what is called credentialism, right? That your degrees are still seen as gatekeepers to job opportunities. And do you see that changing? What would be your view?
I think I come from a very different perspective from probably a lot of people in the audience. I come from a very traditional manufacturing background. So I think there has been a tendency to, because the quality of degrees or the outcomes that degrees are able to produce are inadequate, we are going into skills. I think the real conversation and the real discussion should be to say, how do we increase the competence of a functional domain for which we are getting educated on, right? So it doesn't matter, like you're doing a mechanical engineering and you say that degree is not as effective, we should go and start getting skills that are a little bit more visceral in the operating dimensions of mechanical engineering. I think we are splitting it up into segments that don't make any relevance. I mean, the whole study of a degree, whether you want to call it a degree or a skill certification, it doesn't matter. How practically relevant is the dose of education that each one of us are imparted in our current system, right? And I think the transformation, are we looking for instant nirvana to change? I think when we look at it through the lens of instant nirvana, then we look for quick fixes. Right. And I don't think that exists. I think this is a multi-generational transformation that we need to go through as a country. And we need to make that investment every day.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And when so you raised a good point about the real importance is competence, right? Which is what we need to, and we have seen a lot of surveys actually relate to the fact that a lot of people, and I can, I can now, of course, deal with it in my capacity of an academic leader, that a lot of our students are not really employable, right? That the industry actually needs to, then look at training them. So, while we have, people who are qualified, but they are not necessarily employable. So you think, is there some, is there some specific issue that we need to tackle especially from an Indian perspective, and we'll get to the global perspective later on?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of bashing of academy that happens when I'm sitting on the other side as a consumer of talent, right? So we say they've not been prepared enough, they're not being developed enough, and we therefore have to invest a lot of time and money in taking these students or the incoming employees to another standard. But I think, again, I'm coming back to this. These are temporary fixes. But if we really want to do transformation, I think there has to be much greater collaboration between industry and education. Not the traditional, let's do joint projects, let's do this. I think it's at a much more fundamental that we need to work to build a curriculum that is going to deliver the result. Whether the curriculum, we can't say curriculum is academic responsibility. I think it's equally a industry responsibility. What is it that we demand out of our service provider? And how serious are we about going and making that service provider deliver to our expectation? I think that piece is missing. There's a lot of bashing that is going on.
Yeah.
But I would say industry is equally at fault in not going forward and partnering to collaborate for a longer term agenda. And I think that's something that we need to do. That's my
I think
feeling.
I think that's a great point. That I think industry needs to also take an equal partnership, because as I have lived in in California for a few years, and I saw and we see that the Stanford University actually has some full-fledged facilities within their campus, which is sponsored by Google, right? And so Google does a lot of collaboration, with Stanford on how do they tackle the challenges of the next the next generation, and essentially. So I think that's something that in India also, because when I remembered, I've been at IIMs and I've been discussing with many of my professors as to what do they feel about it. And while some of them are quite keen to engage with the industry and they actively do assignments with the industry, etc. A lot of people have that sort of an intellectual arrogance, right? That we don't really care about the industry, right? It's a little bit of that.
So I think there is also a larger question that we need to ask is, what are we building our business for, right?
Yeah.
Are we building a business on the basis of people leveraging a low labor factor cost? Or are we willing to build a business that fundamentally assumes that Indians are going to be expensive, right? Now, most of our businesses are built on the assumptions that Indians are going to be cheap, and therefore they give us the cost competitiveness, and therefore we're going to be an attractive source for companies all over the world. Now, when that happens, if that's your fundamental premise, that trickles down throughout the entire social system, right?
Right.
You want something cheap, somebody is going to provide you that is cheap. Now, the provider of that service is also going to compromise on the investment that they're going to make, because they can't provide somebody cheap if they have to invest in expensive resources. I think it begs a larger question that we need to ask. And again, I'm coming back to the thing is, are we looking at a much more longer term, consistent transformation exercise rather than short-term, flips from degrees to skills, right?
Right.
If today, if we have to go to the shop floor, I'll give you a very personal example in our company. Our shop floor employee today gets about $1 lakh a month, which is pretty good, right? They are skilled in our own vocational training school. They've graduated from 12th grade, so it's a pretty good compensation, right? But we have a factory in Italy. That factory, the technology for that factory goes from our factory here in Coimbatore. And we pay 35 lakhs there, right?
Right.
And they're profitable, right? The question is, if they can be profitable with our technology, it's our own factory, what's wrong with us? Why are we able to afford to pay only 1 lakh? Now, the reason I'm raising this question is, if you're willing to pay only 1 lakh, your entire investment to develop that person is going to be also moderated to that extent, right? So the whole ecosystem and the social system is aligned to being low cost. Then if we sit down and we complain that there are skills that are lacking, there are competencies that are lacking, fundamentally, are we looking for that high level, and are we willing to invest? I think that's a larger question that I believe that we need to be asking.
Yeah, no, I would certainly agree with that, right? Yeah, that's super important. Okay, taking on, another thread, right? It's now we are seeing that, the world of work is going to change significantly, right? We are seeing that with artificial intelligence and automation and a lot of technology-led changes are going to, I think there are two views, right? One view is that, it is, obviously going to make education accessible for for a lot of people. So that's sort of the positive side of it. But the other challenge is that, are we also potentially going to widen what is called the digital divide, right? In which the people who have access to resources and technology and therefore will it potentially, especially in a country like India, will it potentially impact equity, social equity, in terms of, who has access to education and therefore, which is the whole sort of degrees versus skills debate anyway all about, right? Because as education becomes more expensive.
Absolutely.
What's your view on that?
I think anything that is not available freely and democratically is going to create inequity, right? So something is not available to some set of people, then there is a denial of that segment of society, and there will be inequity. Now, do we have the ability to transform the entire system to have access, like in a Scandinavian system where everybody has access to the same standard of education right up to whatever level you want to study?
Right.
That's a completely different model. And are we ready to transform to that level? I think that's a larger question, but maybe not in this forum. But yes, this is a risk that we have. So the value of work that we have to build should not be so deeply differentiated between the ones that have certain specialized skills and the ones that do not, right?
Right.
So if that value of work is reasonably moderated, I think we could work towards not creating this inequity, but the risk is always there, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. I think what just to build on what you said, right? I think what is important is that, the governments and the social organizations and maybe the corporates as well, they look at how do we develop affordable, so which can then democratize this, right? Because everyone needs to, have access to it. Could be some community partnerships, etc. So, okay. Now, one final, sort of question, and I'm conscious of time. I think what should we, there are, of course, hundreds of people here sitting in this room. There are thousands of people who are potentially, going to be thinking about. So should we think about, pushing our children into, I remember once I was, selling a very large 100 million deal to a CEO in Hong Kong, the CEO of dairy farm company. And I found out that that person was actually, initially he was into the retail shelves. He had no degree, he had nothing. I was super impressed, right? In India, I don't think we have very many examples of, CEOs, etc. So are we going to have, what's the message that we want to leave, the audience with? Should there be a continued emphasis on, on degrees coming to the skills versus, or is it that we should, both in India, just like in the US, there's a bit of a shift, that there is movement towards, that you have, role models who are not necessarily, highly qualified from a professional degree perspective. How do you see,
I don't think these are two buckets of options. I think they both exist.
Right.
I think at the fundamental level is what is the competence that we are able to bring to play through a purely skill-based route or through a degree-based route. For me, is irrelevant, right? I think at the end of the day, we are delivering value to the customer and to our stakeholders.
Right.
Now, how do we do that in the most effective manner? I think that's the thing. Is skill development going to be a better route to that? I don't necessarily think so, right?
Right.
Is degree going to be a less of a means to get there? I don't think so, right? But the content in both need to go through a transformation, right? In
Yes.
the current context of what we have, yeah.
Right. No, absolutely. I think so I guess the answer is that both continue to be important, right? Both continue to be important, but both need to focus more on what is what's the ultimate outcome that's being generated through the competence. So I think we go back to the same point that, it is not just the academia which is, then responsible for making sure that, that the people have the right skills and competencies. I think it is a combination of industry and academia, which is one of my passion areas as well, that they come together and make sure that the curriculum is, effectively integrated, to make sure that they are working jointly in making sure that our youth is employable, is committed to adding value, and the fact that ultimately, NASSCOM is a big proponent, of course, of our technology and the IT and the ITES sector, right? But I'm sure NASSCOM's also waiting, when we will have the next, the Googles and the Microsofts and the Apples of the world will come to India, and that will only happen, I think, when there is a combination of as you rightly said, that we have focus on competencies.
Sure.
And not just the skills versus the degrees. So I think we should.
I think we've run out of time.
Yeah, I think we've run out of time. This is obviously,
I think we have some time for questions, I
Yes,
presume,
we can
right? So
potentially take some
I think
questions
we have
now. Yes.
somebody at the back.
Hi, my name is Ramesh. So you spoke about industry giving the inputs to the curriculum, right? So for the service providers. So when the service providers delivers, they will be having some, like the industry will be having some compulsion to give it back. For example, the curriculum is changed based on the skill development. So the expectation will be raised on the industry. But the industry will not be on a upper level always, like it will be ups and downs, right? So how to address that issue?
So can I go?
Please, go ahead.
Let me try and understand. You're saying that there are business cycles at which the affordability of the industry will keep varying, and as a consequence, they will not be able to, attract talent at the right kind of compensation. Is that your question?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, those challenges are going to happen, right? It is not, if it is happening in a sustained manner, then we have a fundamental problem. But if it's going to be cycles, 1 year there is an issue, we deal with them. Just like commodity prices go up, what do? We deal with them, right? Now, the fundamental question that I have is, if I go and select a mechanical engineer, I can get a mechanical engineer anywhere from 5 lakhs to 15 lakhs is the range I can get an engineer, right? And then we complain that there is a certain competency gap that is there, right? Now, if I can pay just as the average median salary for a mechanical engineer in the US is about $80,000 to $100,000, right? Now, assuming that that delivers a certain level of competence, can we afford to pay that? Now, the minute you build a business that can afford to pay it, the universities then invest in developing people who are deserving of that value, right? So the whole ecosystem changes, but it takes time, right?
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, we have one more question there. Yeah.
Hi, this is Suresh. Just to pick up on the last point, do you have any suggestions how industry can incentivize the universities and colleges to build better curriculum to enable adoption of these talents faster?
Yeah, let me take that. So, I mean, there is certainly, because the industry wants, students to be a certain level of competence, across a variety of skills, and which over the last few years has changed significantly. Now, I can talk about Amity University, right? Because Amity is actually investing significant amount of funds, both their own as well as, funds that are in sponsorship with the industry, on driving a lot of research into these areas. So I think and they have partnerships with several top industry groups around this. So I think the answer is that the industry needs to formulate their intended outcomes very clearly, and then go and have that incorporated in how the curriculum development at the universities and business schools and things like, just at a round table a little bit earlier we were discussing how has, the world of marketing, for example, has changed so significantly in the last 10, 15 years. Now if you look at the Coca-Cola company, and I have worked with Coca-Cola, when in my corporate life, 60% of their marketing is now digital marketing, right? So it's no longer the kind of marketing that always, our business schools used to teach. So those kind of skills need to continue to be, and I'm sure that the Coca-Cola company would be very willing to actually, fund that kind of investment into the education and the curriculum. Yeah, so that's,
So,
if
I
you
think
can
we've
add.
run out
Yeah.
of time, Amod,
Yeah.
and I think I've got a signal from
Okay,
someone that
sure.
we need. So it was great talking
So,
to you.
no,
Thank
great.
you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you so
very
much.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to NASSCOM YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.